Hi, I'm Sean from Dublin TEFL. Thanks very much for joining us. This session, we're looking at a follow-up to possibly the session you've just come from on the video, I don't know, looking at developing listening skills. In that first session, it's called Going Off Script. You can go and find it if you've not seen it. In that session, we looked at differences between unscripted and scripted speech. We looked at possible lesson procedures and some in-lesson techniques. Very often when I do that session, either face-to-face or on that recording, we don't get ages to look at the particular kind of micro techniques that teachers can use in the classroom. So I'd like to look at that and just record it here. If you've been waiting for this for a long time, thank you for your patience. I know I've promised to do this on several occasions, but here it is at long last. So there was a slide, it looked like this in that original talk, where we had various speech bubbles around this guy, Alan. More about him again in a minute, looking at various techniques you can use during and post listening in order to develop the phonological system and stronger, more automatic decoding skills for your learner listeners. So I want to look at those. Okay, quick recap as to where I'm coming from on all of this about learner difficulties, and this is mentioned again in that first videos. The biggest difficulty, the biggest challenge learners face up to about B2 level, and often beyond as well, depending on their learning experiences, is basic decoding. That's a paraphrase from John Field. You can find an interview with him saying pretty much the same thing on this Dublin TEFL YouTube channel as well, but you can find it also in a lot of his written work. Basic decoding, so matching the sound stream, matching the speech, the sounds, the auditory signal to known phonemes, syllables, and words, especially in your lexicon. So basically, that feeling learners have, or you have when you're listening, and you're like, I didn't catch it, I can't, it's too fast, maybe you feel like that. You can't, when you see it written down, you're like, ah, yeah, I know these words. The biggest difficulty is rapidly, automatically matching those so that you can then free up memory resources to start working on discourse and meaning building. So that's where we're coming from. So a lot of these techniques focus on the phonology. This was is a procedure that we kind of recommend, a framework more than a procedure. I suppose you can slot in different things. It'll depend very much on your learner's needs, on the text that you're using, and so on. You have two routes you can go down. You can plan the phonology, or you can kind of do it reactively. This recording focuses especially on numbers 3. So how do you focus on those planned or react to those perceptual difficulties? How do you do the decoding stuff, shall we say? And number 5, so the follow-up. It's like maybe you've done a listening and you want to follow up on some of the phonology in it. And as I've noted on the procedure on the slide here, it doesn't necessarily always have to be right at the end or in a later lesson. It could also happen at various stages. Okay, but as a broad kind of procedure, shall we say, or something that can work, one way of doing things is this, and this is something that we help teachers with when they're working on their teacher qualifications, or on developing listening material for their particular context and their learner groups. So, with no further ado, let's get back to that slide. This is Alan. You might remember him, Alan from the Isle of Wight. He is from, let's grab that and show it here. You can see me in the corner, from this wonderful book, Authentic Listening Resource Pack, Mark Hancock and Annie MacDonald. Let me reference them once again, and do go check out their website, hancockmacdonald.com, for loads of great pronunciation and listening material. So this is from that book. It's Delta Publishing. You can go back and listen to the video. I'm not going to play it in this recording, but here's the transcript. He talks about stuff to do on the Isle of Wight. As I've already said, and I'll always say, maybe this isn't good for your students. Maybe this is not the right topic. Maybe it's not interesting for them. Maybe it's not the right variety of English. It's not going to be useful. It's not what they are likely to or want to be able to understand well. but also maybe it is. Okay, but this is just one that I've kind of picked out of many because it's got some good features of fast unscripted speech. And we've talked about in the previous session, we've talked about choosing a section of it, listening, and basically with a highlighter, thinking what bits are difficult to understand, to catch, because they're reduced usually. And here's a quick recap of the many possibilities. If you're saying, I want to do a phonological focus, I want to help my learners with their phonology for listening, what bits do I focus on? So you have to think about what do they find difficult? Now, if you've got a monolingual group, it might relate to their L1s, but also this comes from your knowledge of your learner group or typical student profiles that you have in your school, in your institution, and so on. What have you done already? Obviously, this doesn't come out of nowhere. This lesson is part of a course that you've designed, hopefully, or somebody's designed thinking about these particular learners and their needs. So what have they already done? And if you're the teacher, you'll know this. You'll know, have I done nothing with them so far? In which case, I'm going to have to really hold their hands. Have they already seen a little bit of, I don't know, elision in a previous listening lesson? Have they seen a little bit of, fusion in question forms when we did that thing on grammar the other week? Who knows? Okay, so it'll depend very much on what they've done already, and you can revisit areas, or thinking about, okay, I don't want to overload them in this particular lesson. Now, what kind of text do they listen to now? What are they listening to on social media, on the internet, or in real life, in the face-to-face, in-person world? On TV, in the cinemas, what are they listening to? Or what do they want to listen to? What about right now? What about in the future? Are there any particular features in that type of text that would be useful to focus on? Another thing to think about is the genre. What is this? Is it a podcast? Is it a TV interview? Is it a job interview? Is it interactional? Is it transactional? Thinking about those things as well will help you think about what features it has. And will these be difficult and worth the focus? In brackets there, a paraphrase from Paul Nation. How does today's lesson help with tomorrow's text? I think it's a paraphrase. It might be a direct quote. Anyway, go check that out, Paul Nation. It's a good thing to bear in mind. We don't want to just help our learners understand this video or this audio that we brought into the lesson. We want to help them develop in general. We're not just testing them on this particular recording. We want them to take something away from the lesson that's going to help them next time they encounter something similar. And of course, the variety of English that's used in the audio or the video. Is it likely that this is going to be useful? Are there any features of that variety that are worth highlighting? Is it similar to your variety if you're a teacher, or is it different? Various things to think about in terms of what phonology am I going to focus on with this recording. Okay, so you're at that stage with the transcript. Once you've decided, and this is the bulk of the session now, once you've decided, then what do you do with it? Okay, this is what I've chosen, and I mentioned this in the previous session. So it doesn't have to be this. This will depend very much on who I'm teaching, who my learners are, all of those different things. But I've chosen this. And you can see highlighted in green on the transcript some areas that will be difficult for a certain group of learners I have to perceive. So lots and lots. We got lots and lots, lots and lots, lots and lots. It doesn't match their expectations, not clearly articulated. The word and is not the word and, it's the word lots and lots. In the second one, lotser, there's a lotta. All of these will be quite hard for my learners to pick up. Also, they're very high frequency in spoken English. So again, thinking about how's this lesson going to help with tomorrow's text? If we focus on these, it's got a good payoff, okay? All right. So as I said, parts 3 and parts 5, that's what we'll look at. First up, let's take a look at a staple of a lesson for me and for a lot of the teachers we work with, a staple of helping to develop decoding. So a gap fill, but not a gap fill focused on grammar, focused on lexis, a gap fill focused on perceptual difficulties. We call it a decoding gap fill. I'm sure other people do too. I'm not trying to lay claim to that as a term, but essentially you take those areas that you've decided are difficult, those bits you've highlighted, and then replace the highlighter with a Tipp-Ex, or the more common technological alternative. Here, what am I doing? I've got PowerPoint, so I've got a projection, and I've covered up these with little boxes. If I don't know if you can remember the script there, let's take a look at some of these gaps. But let's see, number 1. On the Isle of Wight, well, the thing is, we get lots and lots of festivals every year. So number 1, lots and lots, lots and lots. Learners have to hear that and write it down. Then number 2, we've got lots of, again, just revealed there. We've got lots of chances to go to music festivals, classic car festivals, or whatever. And number 3, there's a big art scene. There's a big art scene. Bit of a false start there as well, which could cause problems. So essentially, it's a gap fill. You could have this on a piece of paper with blank lines, and learners write it in. You could have it on a typed document that they fill in. You could do it on a whiteboard, a blackboard, glass board, whatever you have. You could get learners to do that. You wouldn't have to have the whole transcript sometimes, but enough before and after the gap so that they know exactly what bit they're listening for. Okay. My advice when doing this is that for each gap, don't play through the whole recording and then say, okay, let's look at number 1, let's look at number 2. Do each one by one. Their short-term memory, the auditory memory, the phonological loop will decay. They won't be able to hold that sound in their head. Do each one individually. So we'd say, okay, let's do number 1. The thing is, we get lots and lots of festivals every year. Pause, okay, and wait. And also, don't have learners shout out. Okay, make sure you have everyone even just sort of remind them, finger on your lips quietly, write it down. Okay, now I'll play it again. We get lots and lots of festivals. Now I'll play it again. We get lots and lots of festivals. One thing with this kind of approach is that you'll have multiple replays in a sense, in a way that maybe you're not that comfortable with, or maybe you've not done before, but it's necessary to play it again and again when you're doing very close, focused phonological work. Okay, just to, as I say, you can't hold that much auditory signal in your head. Okay, so you have to pause after each one and play it again. You can also yourself sort of read it out, and that's what we would call the human tape recorder. Again, maybe other people have called it that. That just happens to be a term that I've used. I'm not, again, laying claim to that term, but you can sort of say it yourself, slow it down yourself as well, until the learners get it. Let them look in pairs as well. If you've got a group class, let them look in pairs. Give them some clues as well. And I'll show you the sorts of things we might do in that respect in a moment. This is an online alternative using a collaborative written document like a GDoc. I usually use GDocs. This is from a different text as well. You can see at the bottom here, I don't know if you can see how big that is, or if you can pause the video and enlarge it on your screen. But at the bottom, you have the gap fill. So number 1, what's the gap? Something, 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 big parking lot. Number 2, something, 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 building. And we parked. This is some sort of travel story. I think a weather-based story. Someone parked their car, covered in snow. Anyway, lovely story. On the left here, these are the students. So we've got Alex, Bousset, Gaufrains. Okay, you have all of these students in the class. And on the top, you can't quite see it, but those are numbers. So it's number 1, number 2, number 3. And in each gap, the students are typing. This was from a synchronous online class, but equally, depending on if you've got a high-tech classroom setup, you're using kind of collaborative docs. If you have learners on laptops or devices where they're typing, you can also do this in an in-person class. What are the advantages of this? Well, you can see what students think they heard very quickly. Now, in the in-person class, you should be walking around and having a look. What are they writing down? What do they think they heard? Because more than getting the right answer, it's a window into where problems are. And those are problems that you as the teacher should be able to address to a certain degree. So let's have a look at these people here. What problems have they got? Number 1, the car was in and there was a big, this is right at the beginning of the story. So that's wildly different between the first 2 students. I guess that they're just tuning into the audio. Let's choose something a little bit later. What about number 3? There was already have, there was already about, there was already about, there was already have. Nice split there. I imagine the answer is about. Okay, but it's something at that point you would pause and ask the learners, what did you hear? And also validate what they think they heard, because there is a possibility that the auditory signal sounds very much like what they've written down. Of course, as proficient English speakers, English users, your brain will sort of fill in the gaps. You'll think you've heard something that maybe isn't there because you're expecting a certain grammatical form, dependent preposition that's going to come next. Maybe the way it's said by the speaker on the recording, on the video, what have you, maybe it is actually much more like have. So this is what Caldwell's called the decoding gap. You, as the expert listener, will kind of fill in what is maybe not there in the auditory signal in the first place. So as I say, pause then after each gap and explore. Say, okay, so half of you heard about, half of you heard have. Let's play it again. It does sound a bit like have, but actually that's not possible. Okay, and then get on to the next one. There's various things depending on the time you've got in the lesson that you could pause and sort of explore there. But sometimes you'll have things like phrasal homophones. Mark Hancock again has some good material on this. Phrasal homophones, where learners might hear something, ghost words, I've called them before as well, or ghost phrases. They'll hear something that isn't really there, but actually is a fairly good representation of the real audio that's present in the recording. So anyway, gaps, kind of dictation, essentially, micro dictation. But in this case, because you have a whole transcript and you're gapping it out, it's like a gap fill. It's a very familiar task, usually, to language learners. So it doesn't add that extra burden as well. As well, very low tech. This is an example just doing it on the board. So this is a photograph of a whiteboard. Not the best handwriting, it's my whiteboard. And you can see this one was, two people were talking about their rent. And one said to the other, do you think our rent will go up? And the other said, I hope not. So that's A and B. Speaker A, do you think our rent will go up? Speaker B, I hope not. Fingers crossed not. Just have to wait and see, I guess. Very, very short extract. They'd listened to this and they'd already talked about, okay, what are the two speakers talking about? It was a longer extract. And this was the last bit where the learners had said, I have no idea what they're saying. Something about rent. What are they saying? So it's like, right, that's a reactive focus. Let's focus on that. Very quickly on the board, writing exactly this. Okay, so, okay, well, listen, and it's a bit of a micro dictation exercise from a recording. Listen and write down exactly what you think they said. And I'm going to play it multiple times. A bit of scaffolding. You can see the procedure here. So that's the first bit of the board. The next time, to give a bit of extra help, I put some slashes between. I basically told them how many words is it. Okay. Do you think our rent will go up? You can see the 3 lines. Do you think? That's 3 words. Do you think our rent will go up? Just putting a slash, or like it's almost a bit like a hangman, isn't it? But with words, a little gap on the board to show how many words it is. And then to give extra support, writing the first letter. All the while between doing this, in my case, this was in person, so I'm looking around and I'm looking to see what the learners have written, what exact words have they written, where are the problems that we can focus on. And the last one is the answer, isn't it? Do you think our rent? Do you think our rent will go up? Multiple plays from the video from the recording, or the human tape recorder in inverted commas. All that means is say it yourself, read it from the transcript. So I would say, do you think our rent will go up? So keeping whatever features of connected speech were in the original recording, keeping that, but slowing it down. Do you think? And then maybe you would use the phonemic script at the end once they've got what was said. And maybe you'd also say, listen, that's super common. Do you think? It's very often, do you think? Do you think? Do you think? And there might be some other follow-up phonological activities you can do working on that coalescence. Okay, so that's decoding gap fills, board building, human tape recorder. All of this falls under a very broad umbrella of dictation-related activities or transcription activities, not with phonemic transcription, but transcription, just simply writing down what you heard. A similar one is pause transcription. You pause the recording and just say, write down the last few words. Usually it's about 4 words. You can also do that orally as well. Have a look in Sheila Thorne's book, Integrating Authentic Listening. There's some good expansion on that if you're interested in that. Predict and check. So let's say you have essentially found out or taught that lots of often sounds like lotser. You can then have, with that information, get learners to predict where is it going to happen again, or when might it happen again. So they have the rest of the transcript, and you say, right, read the transcript. Do you think it's going to happen again? Underline where. You might be lucky in that you've got a transcript where there are this feature multiple times. You might not, and in which case you say, okay, well, listen, look at these sentences or these little mini recordings, transcripts. Do you think it's gonna happen there? There's no right or wrong answer in terms of will it be lotser or lots of. It will really depend on the speaker, the listener, and the topic, and various factors. But the point here is for the learners, not about what's right and wrong, but about what's possible and about what's frequent. So this, with this kind of speaker in this situation, this is very common. Shadowing, what's that? Working with the transcript and getting learners to read and listen at the same time, or without the transcript. Shadowing in its original conception is very often without, and some people would say you mustn't use the transcript. But here's ways of using the transcript. Once you've done a lot of the listening comprehension work, you've fully sort of processed for meaning, you've explored it, you're towards the end of a lesson. One good thing to do is like, play the recording and read it at the same time, just to see if you can notice some of the things that you've already been working on phonologically that lesson. And with shadowing, one thing you can do is to say it yourself. As I say, originally shadowing would be without the transcript. So simply, it's like, right now, as a final thing, listen to Alan and try and say what he says just a split second afterwards. So on the Isle of Wight, on the Isle of Wight, says the learner, on the Isle of Wight, on the Isle of Wight. And it could just be mumbled. And this is something that's very often has been shown, in fact, to improve awareness of things like prominence and intonation. There's a link there on the slide, but anyway, it's the sort of thing you can go away and Google, or Google Scholar. Shadowing intonation work, you'll find some research that supports that in the development of awareness of intonation and indeed production of intonation. Not so much my focus here, being that we're looking at receptive phonology. However, it's something worth looking into. But there's various different shadowing or shadowing adjacent things you can do with the whole recording and getting students just to try and repeat the whole thing in real time. It doesn't matter if they don't get the whole words, even they can just be mumbling a lot of the time. Focusing maybe on things like prominence and intonation as well. It's a nice phonological technique to use once you've done the listening. Okay, the Botanic Walk is quite famous now. I feel like it is because we use it so much. But from Richard Cordwell, of course, a very big figure in receptive phonology. His books, Phonology for Listening, Decoding, a listening syllabus, plus his website, has a big influence on all things phonology and listening. If you don't know it, his sort of metaphor or analogy for different modes, different areas of speech, ways of speaking, I suppose, was the botanic metaphor and the botanic walk. So you have the greenhouse, which is citation forms, the dictionary forms, words very separate, and so on. Then you have the garden, where words meet and politely shake hands. I've heard him say before, which is a nice way to sort of show the rules of connected speech that you might learn on an initial and later training courses, like assimilation happens when this consonant meets this consonant, and so on. Those sort of rules of connected speech. And then the jungle, which is much more messy. Any word could be unstressed. It could also be unstressed content words as well as function words. things can be much more radically reduced, and surprising things happen. As a quick illustration, I forget where I got the original one of this from. It might be in Field. It might be in Peter Roach even. Anyway, if you're familiar with the phonemic script, try and say that in your head or out loud, depending where you are. And what does it say? Okay. So we've got na, meme. Saying that very slowly, because I think if I say it fast, it gives it away. Anyway, not meme, not meme, not meme. Without all the co-text, you still might find it difficult to extract. So let's go for the garden version. Do you know what I mean? So do you know what I mean? And greenhouse, do you know what I mean? Do you? So you have these three different modes: the greenhouse, the garden, and the jungle. And you might take something, a phrase from whatever listening you've done, and take it on a botanic walk. Let's do that with a few phrases here, a few sort of multi-word clusters. This slide is my favorite appendix from a book. Do you have a favorite appendix? This is my favorite appendix. It's from my favorite grammar book, actually, Carter and McCarthy, Cambridge Grammar of English, very much based on corpus, as they all are really now, aren't they? Corpus data, but especially spoken corpora as well. And this, what I like about this is just, it shows, I think I was surprised at first, you know, what are the most frequent words and the most frequent clusters in English? And then you look at spoken English, and it's things that don't carry loads of meaning, but have a lot of discourse functions, interactional functions as well. So let's take one of those anyway, at random. Okay, so where are we? Greenhouse. No, sorry. Yes, greenhouse, garden, jungle. Right, so greenhouse, and then. If you're doing this in the classroom, you can even stand, you know, here's the greenhouse, and then move to the garden, and then, and the jungle, nin, and then. And again, it's just raising awareness that the expectations your learner listeners might have are not going to match what they hear in connected speech, in fast connected speech, and also that it's not that it's always jungle, and it's not that the jungle version is always the same. Always remind your learners it depends, and it's not always the same, and it's not always completely rule bound. So the key thing is building up that awareness that the expected sound, if you're focused very much on written English, is not going to match what you hear the vast majority of the time, and it could be quite varied. But you could take any of these on a botanic walk. I don't know what it. I don't know what it. I know it. I know it. You can find something radically reduced like that if you just pause a video on YouTube, and you'll notice that things can get completely dropped, whole words sometimes. Okay, thanks to Chris DeGuerra for letting me share this this bit of lesson material. The sub-vocalizing technique is a technique that's used in drilling, and was from Richard Caldwell has suggested this as well. Certainly Mark Hancock has suggested this. Here's a bit of material, here's a bit of it in action, shall we say. So, and this is a technique recommended by Field as well in diagnostic listening, you know, playing a recording and asking the learners, how much did you understand? Just to get a kind of baseline. This is from an online lesson, you can see. And this is about Alan, the Isle of Wight guy. Okay, and this lesson looked at multi-word clusters in crush zones or squeeze zones, both terms from Richard Caldwell, same meaning, just changed from one book to another. Crush zones being the unstressed part of a tone unit. So this one, and it's not audio enabled, I don't think, but you would play the recording and it's, you got a lot of chance for this, you got a lot of chance for this, you got a lot of chance for this. You could play that from the video, you could play it it's just an audio file, you could say it yourself like the human tape recorder, and get the learners to say it themselves. So just to almost get their tongues around or even their heads around the sound. You got a lot of, got a lot, you got a lot, you got a lot of, and repeating it again and again, really focusing on the sound more than the meaning, and whispering it. You know, if you're in an in-person classroom as well, because you don't want to embarrass, maybe just doing it very quietly. Really sort of focusing on how the sound shape, I suppose. And what you could do is then represent this in using folk phonetics. Again, this is from the same lesson sequence. So you have a gorlo, gorloda, gorlo, or something else, other. There's no correct answer. The point is, it's raising awareness that that's a funny sound. Okay. At this point, the learner still might not know the word. And in fact, in the lesson, I've seen this lesson, they didn't. They just knew, like, there's this funny kind of word sound. What is it? I don't know. You think it sounds like this? I think it sounds like that. Okay, no, I thought it was B. Well, I've got something else that I wrote down. What's he saying? And can you say the words to yourself in garden? Meaning, what are the actual words? And it's got a lot of. Got a lot of golo on the video. Okay. And there's an example of using folk phonetics. If your learner's good with phonemic chart as well and phonemes, why not use that as well? That's a list from that Isle of Wight recording. So you got a lot of, go a lot of, you can take her, you could take her, and so on. Okay. It's a bit, I like that one, zabe, zabe. Okay, so you've got the elision there, making it sound, yeah, quite different. It's a bit different. Okay, which leads on to another technique, the broken record technique, or microloop, I've heard it called as well, where you just take one of those sounds and work it around, just say it again and again and again and again and again. So you could take it, you could take it, you could take it. You could do that quietly, you could do it whispered, you could do it out loud, but trying to really sort of strengthen those memory traces so that you can more rapidly access, like, that's a possible sound shape for that cluster of words. You can take a golo. There's a lot of playing around with the sounds. This one, it's the stress pattern dictation grid. It's not a very catchy title, I know. This is from Emma Mead Flynn, originally her idea that I stole years ago. And it's, again, it's a dictation activity. It's a way of doing a bit of dictation, okay, a bit of micro dictation. So the teacher has this grid. On the left, these are from the recording. So whatever you have from the recording, think of some similar phrases. And if you think about the stress pattern in those phrases, it's a nice way of organizing it. Okay? You would then read out these, and the learners have to complete the grid. Whoop, jump forward a bit too quickly. Let's see. So for example, you, the teacher, you might say, there's a lot of time. There's a lot, again, using the same phonological features that are in the original. There's a lot of time. There's a lot of stuff. You say that, they have to write it in the top middle column. Okay, there's a lot of time. There's a lot of stuff on the right. You say golo space. They have to match that. Golo. Right, got a lot of, and they would write it in the middle column at the bottom, for example. Here's a completed example. Let's take a look. So the teacher has read out, what have we got? 5, 6, 7, 8 phrases. Maybe they read them out and, you know, they're a little longer as well. But again, it's a chance to repeat, keep hearing similar sound shapes and matching those to words they already know. Another thing you can do is embed some of those chunks into maybe questions or statements, and just dictate it. It's very quick. It's quite easy to do. So I would say, it's a bit late now. It's a bit late now. Write it down. It's a bit late now. Write it down. Again, go around, check, see if they're getting any better. They're basically applying what they've learned. Okay, they've had their awareness raised that zabir can sometimes be it's a bit, and they get to practice. Okay. I like hiking, that sort of thing. Sort of thing would be something. There's a lot of free time in the afternoon. you got a lot of space in Dublin. They write it down as a bonus as well. If these can be things like opinions that they agree or disagree with, they can then follow up in pairs or in groups. Okay, maybe they can write their own. They write their own using some of those multi-word clusters, and then they could dictate it to each other, do some pair dictation. But lots of dictation activities are quite handy for developing the phonological system, the receptive phonological system. I don't know about you, but maybe I don't do enough rap in class. Mark Hancock calls these earworms. He's got a lot of good ones on his site. Check them out. I like the one about kittens. It's a fabulous one. But this one was written by Chris, who was doing this listening lesson for as part of his Dictation and got his learners to do this. We've got a lot of chance to speak English in the class. Will I do it? Maybe not. But yeah, jazz chants, remember those? That kind of thing, okay, where you embed some of these radical reductions or whatever you've got from your recording. You could, not you have to, but this is one thing you could do if it's appropriate for you and your learners. Movie clip corpus. Now, there's a couple of sites. So Youglish, you might know. If not, go check it out. Playphrase.me is another one. Used to be free, maybe it's paywall now, I don't know. TubeQuizard is an excellent site as well, where they use YouTube clips and have made, some of them are for grammar and lexis, but some of them are for listening. So what is it? Anyway, it's a search engine. You type in a phrase, and then it'll give you hundreds of examples, thousands, in fact. Look at this one. I typed in that kind of thing. So maybe that's in a recording I've just used, that kind of thing. And one follow-up activity, very quickly, is like, here's a phrase, type it in, tell the learners as well, type it into Youglish, type it in if they've got their phones, or do this at home as homework. Do you think there will be a reduction in it? Listen and find out. And the great thing about this is they have multiple speakers. And sometimes it will be very clearly articulated, and sometimes it won't. Sometimes it will feature those radical reductions. So yeah, well worth checking out. And you can even make your own based on something from Youglish or playphrase.me. If you have sort of browser extensions where you can download videos, you can go and Google that. That's another techie thing to do. You can download those and you can set those as an exercise or homework, or, put it onto a platform if you share things with your learners, and give them a little bit of practice at home. They can just go and do that. And once you've modeled this kind of thing in class as well, it's great for their own sort of learner autonomy. They can do this with their favorite TV show or TV series. Watch an episode just for pleasure in whatever way they do. Sometimes with subtitles, they like to do that. Sometimes they don't. But just recommend, every now and then as your optional homework task, listen to 30 seconds that you found difficult and pause it, rewind it, and try and write down exactly what you heard. Then do it again, but with the subtitles on. That can be a useful activity. Okay. And there we have it. So those are the techniques that I promised to get round to talking about. There are more. There definitely are more. But yeah, many thanks for listening. The links on the slide at the moment, these are for, what are these for? PD Lab Staff Room. It's a listening group on WhatsApp and on Facebook where you can request authentic unscripted audio. And there's a big old bank on a G drive as well for various topics. So you might go on and say, hey, can somebody tell me about their area, why they like it, and get some genuine unscripted audio. Thanks very much for listening. And yeah, we'll see you next time, whenever that may be.